Well, welcome back once again to Red Hot Talk. We have a little bit of a break last week, but we are happy to be back once again. And I know it's coming up to holiday season. We're all busy with one way or the other. But I have a genuine reason for that because, apparently I had a toilet leak, so I had to fix it somehow. Even so, I have discovered the fault in my toilet, but I haven't managed to fix it because I have to order a new toilet, and it literally just arrived this morning. So this weekend will be my busy weekend trying to replace the entire toilet altogether.
What a glamorous life you live! I can't believe it.
Absolutely, I should make a YouTube video out of it. You know, like people might be fascinated about how I changed my toilet.
or make a you bend video.
You bend video. Right, so we have a topic today, but before we get into what we want to talk about today, we have some news that we want to discuss with you lot, and also share our reaction and enthusiasm about some of these news that Rod has brought to us. So let's go through that one by one, shall we, Rod?
Yeah. I mean, it's not like breaking news as something that's happened that's never happened before, but it's just that now and again I think it's quite nice to catch up with new products, new things, etc., just to see what people's reactions are. So I think the one I think most people are going to react to is the Sony A1 II.
Woohoo!
I know. I had misgivings about the A1 Mark I for various reasons.
Yep.
And I think the A1 Mark II is just more of the same. But it would be interesting to hear what people think about paying £6,500 or dollars for a camera that does everything almost as well as cameras designed to do particular jobs. So,
well, one comment straight away from me is I haven't seen the A1 live. When I bumped into Andy the other day, is that it still looks like an alpha camera. The styling has not changed a bit.
It's the same. It's all the design finesse of a house brick, really, isn't it? I mean, it has the knobs for the things you need to do on the outside, and that's about as kind as you can be, I think.
Well, speaking of ripping us off in today's video chat today, I just felt, Sony could have just make a little bit of an effort to at least, show us that there are some design changes to the body. But, as we know, for the last 10 years, the same.
Sony doesn't do that. It might re-profile the grip, or the body might get slightly thicker. I think that happened with a change to IBIS and perhaps more likely the internal processor. So it's got, as you go up in performance with processors, and now there's an AI processor as well. That takes up more space, and I think perhaps the bodies get thicker as they fiddle with the passive cooling, but no, they just stay the same. I mean, Sony users will say, well, that's good, because, I can just pick it up. It's the same as my old one. But that would be fine if the old one was perfect. But I just don't like them very much, if I'm honest. But people do. Sony an opinion.
Well, it could also be because I don't know. I mean, audience can also chip in as well. What do you think about Sony cameras? Not just about technical side of it, but also about styling. I personally think, when they first came out, certainly looked different. But I don't know. 10 years on now, 10 years on about alpha cameras, they haven't changed a little bit. They look all the same to me.
They are the same.
I feel like if I'm in the Sony ecosystem, if I have Sony cameras, I feel a little bit ripped off by, paying all that money. Like it seems that there's no change whatsoever to the body design, and I don't know what happened to them.
Well, it's not as if it's perfect from the start. For myself, I prefer Canon's contouring of the camera body because you've got smoother edges. You haven't got the hard creases and the kind of hard boxy feel. I also like Nikon cameras because Nikon puts a lot of dedicated buttons and controls on the body that, just do one job. You don't have to customize 7 different function buttons and then remember what you did. But when it comes to holding cameras, I'd say probably Sony alpha bodies are my least favorite to handle.
Just to ask the audience then,
but-
and what will be your favorite handling cameras in terms of brand or
Yeah,
whatever
that's a
you
good
tried
question.
before? Yeah, whatever you tried before, we would like to hear from you. Personally, I will agree with you. I think it would be between Olympus/Ohm System and Canon. I think these two bodies, to me at least, it fits my hand quite nicely. I feel very comfortable holding them, and I mean for a long period of time. So I don't feel fatigue. It just fits it like a glove, on my hand. So, but Sony camera, I handle them many times, but I just don't feel the connection between myself and the camera. Not just the boxy body, but also like you said about the buttons and the layout somehow just doesn't really quite gel with me. I have to do a lot of customization before I can kind of finally, think, okay, this is my camera. But like some camera, you can get it on your hand. It's just like instantly, you just had that connection. So, oh yeah, this is my camera. I can use this.
Or you think, all right, where's the white balance? Oh look, there's a button.
Yep.
Where's the release mode? Oh look, there's a dial. You can see it straight away. I like that's what I prefer. But each to their own. I think the thing that stuck in my mind most of all with the A1 II was the price. So I had to do a couple of Versus articles for Digital Camera World based on the specifications and features.
Yep.
So I compared the A1 Mark II to the Canon EOS R5 II.
Yep.
And you've got the Canon is better in some respects, almost as good in others. It's relatively even, but it's like 2/3 the price. And then you've got the Nikon Z8 in a similar position, half the price. So it's not just that I don't particularly like the Sony body. I just think it's too much money. I don't know what you're getting for the money that justifies that price premium over other flagship cameras.
So obviously this will be today's topic as well. So we're going to dig into that a little bit later on. We're still doing the news beat at the moment.
Okay.
So what's the next item, Rod?
What else have I got for you? Nikon ZFC, very, very kind of silly news in a way. You can now get 4 different special editions. Yep. So you can get like vinyl wraps instead of that black leatherette. You can get wraps in all sorts of funky designs. I don't know that they're particularly expensive. It reminded me of Leica special editions, which are particularly expensive. But what do people feel about that? Do you like a camera that's a bit funky and different? Like all these old Pentax colors you used to be able to get for the, I think it's a KS1. It's about 20 or 30 different colors if you ordered them.
Yep.
Or do you like your cameras black or silver and that's it?
More traditional. Yep.
More traditional. I've got an EP7 Olympus own system, EP7 in white. Not sure about that. Not sure about that at all. I mean,
well, but I would ask the audience one step further, or maybe more in general terms, instead of like having different special editions, so different colors and themes. What about special editions in general? Camera companies has played around with special edition throughout the history of camera making. They make like limited run of certain colorways. They also create a special limited edition, like with different like exotic materials. Like back in the 90s, we have a lot of titanium body SLRs. Like many of them did it. Olympus did it with the OM4 Ti, and Nikon did the Ti series. Many companies had the TIs, kind of titanium body cameras. Technically, I don't think they are any better than the normal version. I think it more or less just the look. You had that raw titanium beigey color that you have, but really, it's not going to be enhancing performance in any sort of way. You may save a gram or two, but I guess that's probably about it.
So, do you think? So, I guess if it's a Leica, it's going to be for collectors and investors, isn't it?
Yeah.
Anything else is probably just going to be for the sake of having something a little bit different. I remember Nikon went through a phase with its entry-level DSLR to doing a kind of shiny red version, which was...
Oh, yeah, I remember those, yes.
It's quite strong. Yes. But they didn't follow through the lenses, unfortunately, so you just have a red camera, black lenses.
Canon did a little bit of the white cameras as well, right? You know, they have a bunch of like the entry level cameras. They did it in white color.
Oh, the EOS M ones. Yeah, you could get different colors there, couldn't you?
Yep.
It
But
didn't help.
even the DSLRs, I think it's domestic only in Japan, but they have a bunch of white camera bodies.
Oh, that's right.
With some white body lenses as well.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah. So they did a little bit of that as well.
So they weren't special editions, but they were like user options.
I believe so. Yes.
I'm surprised there's not more of a market for getting vinyl wraps for popular camera bodies. Perhaps there is, I don't know. But I guess you should be able to peel off the existing leatherette.
Yes, you can.
If you feel have to, then just put a fresh skin on.
Yeah, all I can say is that you can look on AliExpress. There are a ton of different wraps you can get for all sorts of different cameras. Yes, including lenses. Yeah, you can. You don't have to peel it off. You just stick on top of it if you really don't want to damage, what's underneath. And Carl actually just mentioned. I just look at his latest comment there. Hasselblad has some really exotic ones as well, right? In a blue and gold. I remember they had the gold Hasselblad 500C, which sell for like, I don't know, tens of thousands of pounds now, and that's kind of like a very rare thing. Gold cameras, I think we had some gold camera editions in the past. Nikon did some gold cameras, and who else did it? Konica has some gold color cameras. I don't know. I mean, there are quite a few actually, but they're all selling for very silly money now.
I can imagine those would do well as like gifts in a Formula One paddock, for example. But I can't see anyone going out on a natural shoot with a gold camera.
Yeah, and another comment just popped up. Pentax did a 24-karat gold covered Pentax LX with brown crocodile leather. I think I've seen that. I remember seeing a picture of it. I haven't seen it in real life, but I think I've seen a picture of it.
Interesting.
Yeah.
That would be quite an eyeful.
Does anyone listening right now has any sort of special gold camera in hand? pop a picture for us to see.
Gold cameras.
Yeah, that would be interesting.
There's this UK TV show called Antiques Roadshow, where people come along with the thing they think is an antique. Yeah. And a guy rolled up recently with what he thought was a gold or gold-plated Leica from the World War II era. Turns out they would have been worth millions of course, but it turned out to be a fake. So very sad. I don't know how much it's worth. I haven't seen that segment, but yeah, he must have been terribly excited when he's queuing up to be seen. Poor man.
Right. Okay. What's next?
Next up, right? Three-legged thing. Tripod people.
Yes.
Have you got these, Jimmy? So
no.
Microphones are pretty boring things, right? But what's interesting about these is the price. So it's two clip-on. They're calling them lavalier mics, but they're just clip-on transmitters. Yep. Usual kind of arrangement with a receiver. So which has its own mic. So it's basically a wireless 3-mic setup, just like any other. For £99. So I guess in the US it's going to be, I don't know what it's, $119, I'm guessing.
Something like that, yes.
But it's also with the charge case, which I think it is trying to manage a set of wireless mics without a charge case is awful.
Yeah,
you do need a charge case.
It's funny, like just very briefly about this mic thing, and you've probably seen the last, I would say, 2 to 3 weeks. It's funny, right? Rod, and they're all releasing similar products around about the same time. I've found, a lot of makers tend to do that when they release a tripod. Everybody releases tripods at the same time, and then mics. Everybody releases mics at the same time. I don't quite understand that.
Are you suggesting they're generic pattern products? Being rebranded by a bunch of different people.
I'm not entirely sure, but you got the 3-legged thing mics, but DJI also just recently launched a new mic mini, and then Rode also released the micro wireless mic. So 3 companies are known for their mic. Well, three-legged things, their first mics, but then the other 2 are established. They launch within a week window, so like these guys are literally new products run about the same time, but also gunning for the similar sort of audience. And for mobile content creators, so they have USB-C connection. You can plug directly to the smartphone. Of course, you can use it on the camera as well. The dual mic, charging case. So the package is very, very similar.
Interesting, isn't it? I think microphones is a whole topic in itself, because you can't just have one, because depending on what you're trying to do, you need different microphones. And I've got a suspicion that you don't have to pay a lot to get. What you need is a bit of skill in attaching them, getting the levels right, and knowing which to use, the pros and cons of each, what the limitations are. I think probably the difference in audio quality between this one and the more expensive one, you probably have to have quite trained ears to hear it. But I think if you use a cheap mic properly, they sound all right.
Yeah, I mean, to be quite honest, like YouTube videos, for instance, and we talked about this before, you're not going to see the quality that you recorded, because it's heavily compressed for streaming purposes. It's not like something you're going to play on your own 4K television from your own files. You just export it from the video editing software. Anything you upload to YouTube or online or any platform, they will stream back in a very highly compressed format. So you're never going to gain the same quality, because so often all my videos, the sample pictures that I put in my videos, people say your picture looks crap. It doesn't look sharp. Most of my comments just say, look, it looks really sharp for my screen. But I know for a fact that if you play back on YouTube, depending on region, depending on the speed of connection, sometimes they do look horrible, because they compress, they look blurred. It's just the way it is, unfortunately.
I think as well with the audio and with the microphones, some people would just use the sound as captured. Other people will put it through a bit of audio processing to improve it. And some YouTubers are very good at this and can make a bad mic sound good. Others are very bad at it, can make a good mic sound terrible, or they just use the wrong mic altogether. So this is why being an audio engineer is a full-time job.
Oh, absolutely. Hollywood, the audio engineers are paid top dog money just to, have the sound corrected. They're making sure they're consistent and sound as good as they can. And that's why, you do need a professional to do that professional job. So interesting mic for 99. I think it's really good money.
It's pretty good, yeah. I'll show you another little gadget I've got.
Okay.
Imagine most people have seen this already.
Oh, the new Mac
Mini. Now smaller than ever before.
It's almost like an Apple TV show. The little box.
It's not much bigger than an Apple TV, but I'm actually quite impressed, because you get HDMI port.
Yep.
Get 3 Thunderbolt USB 4 ports.
Yep.
And another 2 at the front, and headphone socket. And it starts at £699.
That is very reasonable. If you already got a monitor, that's all you need. Well,
that's the only thing. You've got to have a mouse and a monitor. Yeah.
Yep.
But even the base one comes with 16 gigabytes of RAM. You only get a 256 gig SSD. And if you want to up-spec that, it's quite expensive because it's Apple.
Yeah.
But the prices start quite low. And this thing, just so beautifully made. It's incredible.
Yeah. I do think that I don't know how many of you listening right now use Apple computer or any sort of latest generation of Windows computers, because we talked a little bit about AI processing in both videos and also stills. Now it's becoming more commonplace now. No matter what software you're looking at, Adobe, On One, DxO, they all use some kind of AI, and you do need some the processor to be able to handle that kind of calculations, namely those AI computations. In Apple's term, is the neural engine, so they need high performance neural engines to process those things. And I can tell you that from my experience using current, I have the older generation, so it's M2 Max that I'm using at the moment, so not the latest M4, but the difference compared to what I used to have the video AI from Topaz. the video processing software. If I had to do any upscaling or remastering, I found that the latest M2 Max that I had was at least 4 to 5 times faster than the previous generation Intel computer that I had. So it's quite a big difference there. And so, if AI is something that something you're interested in doing more in the future, but for your processing, whether it's going to be photo or stills, I think getting a newer generations of computers would definitely help significantly when it comes to processing time, and that's for sure. So yeah, that's interesting, and I'm pretty sure that many computer makers are going to looking at a lot of the AI things. Even I've seen that Google and Samsung and they're all gunning for the AI kind of processing side now. Good thing or not, it's up to you to decide, but it is heading that way.
Well, Apple is promising on-device AI this month. So that may mean that a lot of the things that they want people to use AI for don't have to go off to some server somewhere. Where all your data is being...
Yeah, I literally just recently tried the latest generation of the Final Cut Pro, which is version 11. They have a new called the magnetic mask, which is a game changer for me, at least. Game changer for editing videos. But it does use a lot of the AI power from the Apple Silicons. So what it does, basically, in Adobe... like Photoshop, for instance, or even in Lightroom, you can select person or human from the entire frame, and it highlights it for you automatically. Imagine that in video. So that's exactly what Final Cut does now. It's a single click. It highlights that person in interest, and it automatically masks the entire clip for you. So you can adjust the foreground or the background exposures or color individually. And it's really, really interesting. Instead of masking individual frame, this is all AI for you.
Yeah, I think this is where you need the processing power. I've been a bit skeptical about all these new generations of Mac processors and how each one is like 5 times faster than before, etc., etc. But I did do a couple of video rendering tests, and I don't know if this is how people usually measure it, but I found that I have an M4. MacBook M4, MacBook Pro M4 as well, which I'm testing. And they were rendering 4K UHD at over 60 frames a second. By that I mean that they were rendering it twice as fast as the actual speed of the video. So it's 30 frames per second video. So like a 6-minute video is being rendered in about 3 minutes, which I think is pretty good, because in the past I spent many an unhappy hour watching a progress reel.
In my early days of YouTube, when I used to export my, let's say, 10 minutes video on, for YouTube, it would take at least 15 to 20 minutes to render, to export it. But now that's standard.
Is that at 1080 or is that 4K?
4K. And but I had a powerful graphics card. I optionally pay extra for the graphics card to do the job, but even with that, it still takes about 15-20 minutes to do it. But now with Apple Silicons, I can do it. Well, mine is M2, by the way, so it takes about 5 minutes, 6 minutes to do it. So which is lightning fast comparatively. But all this AI masking I just talked about, that won't be possible at all with the older computer. It will be taking extremely long to do that, even if you can.
Well, exactly. We forget how bad things were.
Until you go back a couple of generations and you realize.
The only thing that these faster processors can't fix is you're still going to be limited with your bus speeds and your external storage speeds. And since much of what we do happens on a web server somewhere, we use online services. Your processor can't speed those up. They'll only be as fast as the server and your internet connection. So there will always be bottlenecks. But that's an interesting point. And going back to the camera stuff, is that now computer advancing in it's sort of like lightning speed, but on the other hand, camera hasn't done the same. Camera advancement seems to gone the opposite way. It's kind of stalled. It's almost as if every time they invent a faster processor, they immediately use it all up on some new feature. So you're back where you were.
Which is kind of defy the purpose.
It is. It is.
Yeah, and Carl's latest comment there, I miss the days
Yeah.
of watching YouTube vlogging with shotgun mic and hearing a child in the background having a tantrum.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't actually see people do that anymore, and I remember the early days of vlogging. People used to, handhold a DSLR with a gun mic on top. And obviously some of the most popular vloggers in the early days would be like Casey Neistat on YouTube. He's famously using the Canon DSLR. I think it was the 50D or 70D. I can't remember. A zoom lens and a gun mic, and that's all he does. Basically, that's his vlogging thing. He used that camera until it died, and I'm not sure what he's using now these days. But pretty sure probably Sony. And but yeah, for a long time he was using the big DSLR, with a gun mic on top.
That's I think. Do you think people have gradually figured out that although an on-camera mic is better than a built-in mic, it's still probably not the microphone you need for what you're trying to film? I guess that's why radio mics have become more popular, but they're a fiddle to set up, so everything's just a little bit complicated.
They are. I mean, but equally, gun mic, you still have to attach to it, plug the wire to it. I don't think it's that much more than actually doing the wireless mic setup, and it just looks better. I guess there's no wire. You can walk away from the camera. You can still have the proper audio level instead of like fading away if you the further away from the mic. If you're using a gun. Yes, it's interesting how technology has evolved over time. Certainly, vlogging has changed quite a bit as well since. Yeah.
I think vloggers have gone more professional, and they want to appear more professional.
Yeah,
so they have to pay a bit more attention.
Just use the Pocket 3.
Well, I think the secret is not so much in the camera, but in the audio, because Pocket 3 is a great camera. Phones record good-looking video. Mirrorless cameras are called great-looking video. It's the audio that can let you down. Can let inexperienced vloggers down.
This is why, like we all, Rod and I always say, it's important to listen to the mic, and also appreciate the reviews of mics, because without them, you're not going to get great video content. Like you can have very crap footage, but as long as you got good audio, your video is still going to mean something, because people can usually listen to it, and so sound is very, very important. Okay, that's it. Anything other news that we need to aware?
If anyone's interested, last year, financial year ending in 2024, Leica posted its best ever profits.
Not surprised.
£460 million, $577 million. So that's probably about 3 cameras worth, then, isn't it? The Leica prices.
Well, that's the thing, right? Interesting news about Leica's profitability, because people might think, oh, they're so expensive, they're not affordable to common folks like myself, and but there are absolute plenty of Leica collectors and affluent people out there who would simply snap up any new camera models and any new lenses as soon as they come out.
Yeah, and I think if anyone ever gets a chance to go to any event at the Leica factory at Wetzlar in Germany, you'll find yourself in a room with around 300 people, all of whom have 100 times more cash than you ever will. There are lots of people out there with a very great deal of money. They're the ones buying Leicas. Good luck to them.
Yeah. Well, I mean, saying that though, I mean, I think, fair play to Leica. They use their heritage well, and they continue to push the premium image among its core users, and to further the marketing that way. It's not, even though it's a niche, but it's a very profitable niche that they have right here, and they're definitely not lack of customers. Like I said, everything that as soon as it's announced, basically they have pre-orders in. Everything you buy. I think Leica has a knack for creating products that have a feel of quality and simplicity. Yep.
in the design, so that the only Leica I'm ever likely to be able to afford is the Deluxe 8, which, as many people will know, is really a Panasonic Lumix LX100 Mark II.
Which is a great
The
camera.
technology is the same. But what Leica has done is they've simplified the exterior. They've given it that Leica finesse. And you've got typical Leica controls. So it's half as many buttons that seem to do twice as much. And you've got an interface which is just, you could just lose yourself just looking at the interface, playing with the buttons and the menus. Beautiful design. That's what you're paying for. So you might argue that they're charging 1,500 UK pounds for a Panasonic that used to cost about 800. But it's what they've done to that Panasonic that makes it desirable. It's not just about the technology.
No. Well, just to the audience, any of you think Leica cameras are overpriced? And I would like to hear from you.
Oh, Jimmy, you're a brave man asking that question. We know what's going to happen now.
Well, from a photographic point of view, I personally think they're overpriced. From a photographer's standpoint, look,
Yes,
I use any cameras to make images, and I don't think the Leica images, whether from the lenses or the bodies, okay, they have certain aesthetic, but that's to do with the rendering of the lenses, more to do with the camera body. But I think for what I need to achieve, they're definitely overpriced. You look at a general setup for let's say an M body, the latest M body plus a 51.4. Let's put it very, very simple terms. One prime, one body. You're looking at Leica, it's probably about what's the prices now? The latest M11 is about $8,000, $7,500, and the 50 Summilux would be about $4,000 now. So you're looking roughly about 11 to 12,000 pounds to get that combo. And if you look at all the other camera manufacturers, actually, apart from the A1 now, isn't it? A1 $6,000.
That's more than the Sony A1 Mark II.
So the A1 Mark II with the Sony G Master 51.4, which is $2,500, something like that. And so you are looking around about $8,000 for a Sony combo, which is actually not too bad when you're looking at that compared to the Leica. But if you look at all the other camera manufacturers, I think you can get like a lower end models, not the A1. Look at the A7, for instance, A7 G Master. You're looking at about $4,000. You can get a combination of like that instead of paying $12,000. So about a third money, and you can get similar sort of thing, going. So for me, if I'm going for a fast prime 50 prime, and I could save myself like $8,000 almost, to get a Sony and the A7 and a 51.4 G Master, or equivalent in Sony, Nikon, Fuji, Micro Four will be the cheapest, and so I can get a any body really, any of the Micro Four Third body plus a 25 1.2 Pro, for about 1,500 quid. If I go for a really cheap option. So but saving
look, Jimmy,
quite a bit of money.
if you really wanted a Bentley, you could save a lot of money by buying a Ford.
That's
and
true.
Still get the same outcome.
I'm just going A to B.
It's what you want. It's what you want.
Yeah.
If
I like to
what
hear
you want is important to you, then you've got to take that into account. But I would say, I think the SL series do not have any special image aesthetic to them at all. The output from those to me looks like that of any other mirrorless camera.
Yep.
The M series is different because the output from that is quite unique.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean to say you're going to like it, but it is unique.
Yeah.
But the SL series, they're expensive for what you get in terms of image quality and specs. They are quite expensive.
Yeah.
Nice,
yeah.
but
it's nice. Like I said, like a Ferrari, right? You want it. You definitely want it. If given a chance to own it, you will. But then, but for majority of us, I think if we have the budget to buy a Ferrari, we'd probably want to spend, a fraction of that just to get a normal, decent car, and to spend the rest on a nicer house or go on holiday or to go to an actual place to photograph instead of actually spend all the money to buy a body.
I guess though, if you turn up pitching for work at some grand royal or society wedding,
Yep.
and you turn up with a Leica, you might get the job. If you turn up with the Sony, they'll say go round and back to the tradesman's entrance.
I give you a real example, and I don't know. I mean, some of you may remember Tracy is my friend who used to video me for this channel, and she used to work for a wedding services company in Hong Kong. So they provide photo and video services for potential customer, but their target demographics are all the rich and famous. So the boss of the company told their employee each will have to have a Leica carrying on their neck, but they shoot with a Nikon. They just carry it like a fashion accessory because they know those people will look at what you get or what you're carrying. Yeah. Not necessarily what you use to take the photos, but they need to see that you have something on you that will level that sort of kind of, you know what I mean, the status wise, the level that they wanted to see. You know, why would I pay like, 50 grand for a wedding for you guys to photograph me if you don't have something at least, match up in the value wise? So no, it is true. So it is true.
My last question is going to be Sony FE 28-70 f2. Would anyone out there buy a 28-70 f2? Bearing in mind the Canon one, it's been out for a while.
Yes.
But it's so big that you might have to get a bigger bag to put it in. But the Sony one looks, I mean, I think you've seen it, haven't you, Jimmy? It looks a relatively ordinary size.
Seen it, yes.
But then could you live with the 28-70? Would you miss the 24mm? All these questions doing my head in.
I know. I mean, to be quite honest, if I recall correctly, my very first zoom lens that I had was 28-70. So and to be honest, yes, it's extra 4mm in the YN is definitely good to have, but it's not the end of the world. You know, I could move my feet a couple of feet away to get the similar sort of coverage if I really want to. But to gain, the f2 aperture, I think is worth trade-off.
Interesting.
And to me anyway, because an f2 constant zoom is almost like a f2 primes, right? So you have a bunch of prime lenses in your hand, in just all in one package. I think it's quite an interesting thing. We used to have that in the 4/3 cameras from Olympus. They had the f2 zoom. I don't know if you remember. They had the.
I don't know.
Yes, I have one actually. I have one of them, and it's just the 35-100 f2 zoom. So that's equivalent of the 70-200, but it's constant f2. But they also have the 24-70 equivalent in the f2 as well, which is quite a big chunky beast. So it's not the first, in fact, and Olympus done it ages ago when they had the 4/3 cameras. And if you're lucky enough to own one of those lenses, you can use the MMF or MMF2 and MMF3 adapter to use on the latest generation of the cameras.
So those were SLR lenses.
They're SLR lenses, but they were f2 aperture, so it's really interesting. Then obviously Sigma did the 1.8 zoom for the DSLRs. Which was quite famous and also
I liked them,
yeah,
big.
And many used them because 1.8 aperture, and
not very dear either. Not very expensive.
Don't forget Lumix.
Yeah,
Lumix got
that's what Carly's saying.
The 1.7 Summilux zoom lens, which sell for fortune, but also expensive. Expensive. They're about 1,800 quid, I think, and Yeah, but then again, you're getting a bunch of prime lenses in your pocket, and even though they're big and heavy, but imagine one big lens is equivalent to about 5 prime lenses in your pocket. So, I don't know how you can, juggle that. If you think, okay, maybe I have just one lens there instead of 5 prime lenses in my bag, it may be a good trade-off.
I always think with prime lenses, they're perfect if you know exactly what you're going to be shooting. Yeah. Where it's going to be and where you're going to be. Yeah. I think if you're going to a thing where this is unpredictable, a zoom is what you need really, because you need to be able to adapt very quickly to where the subject is and where you find yourself.
Yeah.
So it depends on how much you know about the job.
And how much you know yourself. And how much you know yourself as a photographer, because a lot of people actually have a preference for certain focal length. And it's
Yeah.
very interesting because I think there was a guy asked me before, if I want to get a prime, what should I get? Currently I'm using a 24-70 zoom lens, and I said to him, go to your library. You can do the metadata filter down the focal length, and see what sort of focal length you use the most, and then you find out what's what sort of focal length you're most comfortable with and most frequently use in your collection of photos, and then you find out what sort of prime lens you should be getting. And you'll be surprised. Most of the time you'll probably find yourself at a 28, 35,
so,
and something like that. Which is more like a smartphone kind of angle of view, and which is 28mm, by the way. And most iPhone, I think, is 28mm. I think and Android is a little bit wider, 24. And I mean, they've 24, 28 is roughly about that sort of range. 50 is the new portrait length, right? for smartphone. So 50 is now like a portrait lens, and anything longer will become a specialist lens.
So I think what's quite interesting with primes, I've done it a couple of times. I've just gone out to take photographs, nothing crucial where I have to come, I've got a brief how to come back with a set of pictures, but just take one lens and see how I get on and see how I feel about it at the end. Yeah. And very often I find that there are some focal lengths I think that was awful, nothing was right. And others where I think, I could just live with this. So I'm fine with the 24. 35, I find is just in the middle. It's nothing in the middle. It's the no man's land. 50, I don't mind if I adapt to it, but 24 for me would be the best walk around everyday length.
You know what? But I used to like 35 1.4. I mean, I shoot with a lot of 35 1.4 in the past, whether it's going to be Canon and the Zeiss or Leica. I love that focal length a lot. But recently, for the last 2 years now, I think I'm slowly getting into the 24, 28, kind of focal length. If I want to shoot wide and in 1.4, I just get this kind of special pop from the frame, and that looks interesting to me for group portraits, and I just find it quite interesting. So I don't know how many of you are thinking of the same way.
It's trouble with the wider focal length. It's very difficult when you've got messy surroundings. You can't control the background in the same way that you can with longer focal lengths.
No.
So, but
you do have to be very careful about what background you have there. If you let's say you have a lot of foliage, if you're shooting in the garden, for instance, you may find your background a little bit busy if you decided to render it out, to use shallow depth of field, because even 1.4, 24. If you've got a half-length portrait, the depth of field is still quite deep. It's not going to be shallow enough to make the background look soft, so it will be quite busy. So that in that case, I think a 50 lens will be probably better. Better still if you've got an 85, and you can definitely get some really nice creamy background if you really want to pop the subject out without looking too busy. So I guess once again, it's just depending on your situations and what sort of thing you like to shoot.
I think I'm thinking of my back garden where I do a lot of product shots and test shots, and with the wide angle lens, I've got the wall, I've got the steps, I've got the shed, I've got a rather ugly tree. I can't keep all this stuff out, but with the longer focal length lens, you can be much more selective about the framing and what you see in the background. So, pros and cons.
Yeah, pros and cons indeed.
But now, Jimmy, your title for this.
Yes,
we've been camera makers. I can't believe you're saying this, but let's hear it. Let's
hear it. Okay, let's forget my personal affiliation with a certain company, and because I do have access to the latest cameras, for instance, and but. Beside that, if you forget about that side of it, if I want to buy a new camera from scratch, if I'm a photographer, I feel that in 2024, or in fact in the last 5, 6, 7 years, I think
excuse me,
all the cameras and lenses now, in the market are simply too expensive, and I don't think I'm getting the value compared to when I first started photography. Like in my early days of photography, and my very first brand new SLR that I bought was the Canon EOS 50E. I don't know if you remember that. and it's got the eye control, 5-point eye control AF. Eye control, yeah. It's not an It's not an RF camera's invention. They exist way back in the EOS era from Canon. So the reason I brought that up is because I bought that camera with a kit lens for about £500, I think, roughly that. And back in the 1998, 97, I can't remember exactly when that was. And so I know you can calculate inflations and all the other stuff into it.
Yeah, that's a long time ago, Jimmy.
That there is, but you look at it generally. You look at a lot of the SLRs back in the days. They range from between £250 all the way to over £1,000. So mine was kind of in the middle of the pack. But £500 was, to me, even though it was relatively expensive, but I saved up for it. But the thing is, I could still afford it. But now, if I want to get into, let's say, if I want to get into a Sony cam or Canon cam, and I need to spend at least, like 12, 13, 14, 1500 to get that body. And then I need to get a lens. And you can, if you're happy with the kit lens, you get the kit lens first, and which add another £150, £200 for the kit lens. So it's very, very expensive, and do they really worth that sort of money for what it is? Because I somehow think that like you said before, Canon were using some older sensors technologies in some of the lower end cameras, and they are actually not necessarily giving the best image quality. That I just feel like I've been ripped, like from all these hyped about mirrorless cameras, the technologies, and while as a beginner, let's say if you're a beginner photographer, all you need to learn is the exposure triangles. You need to learn a lot of stuff, and a lot of these texts that are in the cameras now are completely irrelevant, and it may actually confuse new users.
Yeah, I think we need to find out if there's an accountant in the room with a calculator to work out, let's say, 10% inflation since 1998. I'm not convinced. I reckon your £500 back then probably equates to around 1,500 to 2,000 today, but I'd need to work it out. I'm not completely convinced that cameras have got more expensive overall, but I think that this rip-off idea is interesting. I think in the end we don't have to buy them. It's not like It's not like we're being forced to, but I do think cameras are being developed and marketed with things that we didn't actually ask for, we don't particularly need. And on top of that, we get a new camera that does one thing we definitely want, whether it's faster burst rates or better autofocus, and 3 other things we didn't want. So
you have to get them together.
Yeah, you can't split them up. So you can't get let's see if I can think of an example. You can't get the what should we pick? You couldn't get the old Sony A7R4 with its 61 megapixel sensor, very good sensor, with just the AI processor. You had to get all the other stuff that went into the A7R5. So you only wanted one little thing, but you had to upgrade to a whole lot of other things you didn't really want. So that's one part of it. But I also think that the whole marketing machine has got us all fooled into thinking that because everyone is going on about codecs, frame rates, in-camera, raw video, AI, AF, AI, subject recognition, increased numbers of AF points, the marketeers have convinced us this is important because it's all they ever talk about.
Yep.
And I'm not really quite convinced that's true.
And funny you mentioned about the marketeer, because obviously I don't know many marketing people who work with the camera makers, and I wonder sometimes how many of them actually understand photography, to the way that we photographers think. And anyway, the same thing goes to because I'm pretty sure a lot of the models releases or during the R&D stage, they will get a lot of input from marketing. They will tell them, okay, this is the trend. This is something that people want. They're gonna have some direction from these people. Obviously, we go through the executive, the high level decision making before it comes to R&D, but I'm pretty sure they have significant impact on the developments of future products. So that is going to be very interesting to me. Is do they really understand us, photographers out there? And we talked about that many times now. Yeah, it seems that a lot of the cameras these days they're not making for photographers. They're making for gadget lovers. They're making for so-called hybrid. I would still think the hybrid doesn't exist, but for hybrid people, and then it include things that we don't necessarily use. But like you said, and they come with the new models. You just have to get them. If you want an upgrade for the sensors or whatnot, that newer, better sensors, a better dynamic range, noise performances, you do have to get the new model that comes with all of these stuff, and they charge you for it.
Yes. Well, that's the trouble. I mean, if you want, say, you want the Nikon Z8's 120 FPS burst mode, you've also got to have the 8K video, which you didn't ask for, which probably costs quite a lot as well, but that comes with it. You can't have just... I think the worst value cameras are the ones that do everything.
Yeah.
So I think the Sony A1 II... Yes, I've got that right. The Sony A1 II made me think of that. But I think it's also true to a degree with the EOS R5 II and the Nikon Z8. These are cameras that look amazing because they can do everything. But it's not very often that you want everything. Yeah. Maybe you want 8K video, but you don't need those burst rates. Or maybe you want those burst rates, but you don't need 45 megapixels.
Yeah.
It's I don't know. I think the job of camera makers is to sell cameras.
Of course.
And
they need to make money, right?
They need to make money. They need to make us keep buying them.
Yeah.
So the whole marketing machine is based around creating.
I have something to say. I have to say something about make us buying, because I think I discussed it in one of my videos. Is that I feel like because the camera market is shrinking in general overall, and what camera makers are doing is trying to convince existing users to upgrade, rather than trying to make something that that can attract people from the new generations, for instance, from outside the existing user base. They are fighting within each other, within the pool of people, the pool of photographers that we currently have, and that's how much you can do. And they keep trying to do things that make us think that we need them.
Well, yes, and it's a worrying thought. That do you think that all the latest technologies in autofocus and burst rates and everything else are based on market research, where marketeers have gone on YouTube and they've listened to Tony and Chelsea or Gerald Undone, and they've gone back to the makers and said, look, nobody cares about megapixels. Everyone wants 8K video, no overheating.
Product showcase.
Yeah. So there's that, but they managed to pull off this trick where they can convince us that the camera they're offering this year is dramatically better than the one they offered us last year.
Yep.
And if you step back a bit, you think, oh, so that one they sold me last year was a dud. That's not very nice. But
well, that's why I think another thing about today's video is about ripping us is because of that as well. And go back to my old cameras, for instance. And if you're looking back in the 80s, 90s, even up to as recent as 2000 era, product cycles were longer, much longer than now. Like a camera model like my 50E was sold for about at least 8 years before they replaced it.
Yeah.
And most camera models, they last for years before you see an update. But now we got a new model every 18 months, which is very short. But and like you said as well, a lot of these updates are not, to me, not significant enough for me to call it a proper update. A lot of them, they might have a new features, to me, at least in my eyes, that can be implemented by software updates or firmware updates. And then and a lot of these things can be done in software, not, okay, megapixels fine, you do need a new sensor for that. And but a lot of the stuff is simply not necessarily for you to advertise as a new features or better features, because it seems to me that it can be done with the older models.
Well, I think there are a couple of things there. First of all, I'm looking at this comment by Rick Bear saying that people want to be able to say they've got the latest and best thing. That is true. But there's another target for marketeers, and that is people with anxiety about is my camera good enough? Everybody else has got 4K 60p now. I haven't. Oh dear. Yeah. It's that they're not just selling to people who want to have the best of everything. They're selling to people who are anxious that they might need something today they haven't got, or maybe in the future. So I think I think practically everyone under 30 buying a camera now thinks they might be able to make it as a YouTuber. That could be a career. That's a massive market full of people with cash to burn. I think that's one reason why we're seeing a lot of emphasis on video features and hybrid cameras, because there's a ready market out there of people who think they can make it big on YouTube. Yeah. Which is why YouTube is the way it is. But
well, I get that, and I totally appreciate it, because I myself in YouTube as well, so I totally get that market. But like at the same time,
we both are, yeah.
Yeah, so like at the same time, I kind of think that while camera makers are doing one thing, but the likes of like the rise of DJI, for instance, the Pocket 3, to me at least, it replaces all the vlogging gear that I used to carry with one tiny little camera. And overall cost is significantly cheaper than buying a dedicated setup. To me, it's a no-brainer. Okay, you're not going to get the same level image quality compared to a bigger camera. Of course, you're not going to match that. It's a 1-inch sensor at the end of the day. But look, I'm not presenting my videos on a big screen. I'm producing content for YouTube. It's not something that I would need to have that sort of quality. I have proper video camera for my commercial jobs. Sure, I do that, with my proper camera. But for vlogging, like if I'm taking photos at the same time, I don't want to have two sets of cameras holding in my hand, one for vlogging, one camera to take photos. It's going to be really messy, really just too much. Having a tiny camera, handhold, lightweight, while walking talk, and then I have another hand holding a proper camera to do my proper photographs is much, much better way to do it.
Do you think there's quite a lot of status and snobbery around latest tech?
I don't know.
I don't think there is amongst professionals, because professionals, they buy the thing that does what they need to do. It's a very, very straightforward cost analysis.
Well, for professionals, they need to think about make money, right? So whatever they invest, they want to make the money back as soon as possible.
Yeah. So a professional will buy the tool that does the job. I think, but amateurs and enthusiasts and collectors, it's more complex. Yeah. They want the best, and I think a lot of photographers who want to become professionals or professional filmmakers are kidded into thinking that they need the best gear to do it with. Yeah. But actually, they'll only be successful with what's up here, not what's in the camera. Yep. But, it's easier to sell people cameras than it is to sell them knowledge. Well, I should write that down.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a good title. Yeah, that's your next article, Rod.
Yeah. Yeah. But just to return to an earlier thing, this idea that a lot of camera development is incremental, I think is quite true. And I think what proves it to anyone who's not sure is if they get a 10-year-old camera
Yeah.
and use it, I think they'll have the experience I usually have, which is, oh, this is quite good. I mean, this is fine. And then you go back to your 10 years newer camera and think, well, it's better, but, you know, it still does the same things. So I think even though the tech has changed a lot, you can still pick up a 10-year-old camera and be quite surprised by how good it is.
Absolutely. I mean, like a simple way to look at it from a professional point of view is, I mean, if I look back at my library, some of the photographs that I've done for my clients 10, 12, 15 years ago, I think they're still great. So that says, you know, not trying to praise myself as a photographer, but it's just looking at the file quality. I mean, for me, looking at those files that are 15 years old, you know, I processed the way I did, you know, back then, but then I look at them, you know, I could easily use the same quality in today's job. So like, does it actually say something? It says that, you know, I don't need the latest cameras. You know, I could use the camera that I used 15 years ago to do the same job. Okay, there, like you said, some technical advances for sure. You know, 15 years ago, your ISO would probably go as far as 1600. You know, you can't go past that. You have to extend it to 3200. So, oh my God, 3200! I can't live with that nowadays. You know, you need at least 500,000 ISO to be able to do that. And but you get by. You know, you learn how to read the light. You know, you do as what the photographer should do is to understand light and you know, use it appropriately. And if you don't have enough light, you use a flash, right? These days, and we all push the cameras to the limit, put up ISO, you know, just trying to do some natural light night photography. I think
we become obsessed with limits.
Yep.
And we've forgotten that most of our photography is so far within these limits that it's a silly obsession. I do remember when the Nikon D3 came out, what's that, 12 megapixels, and it's the first camera I'd ever used where you could shoot at ISO 6400 and you could bear to look at the images. Well, this is amazing. I can't believe this is even possible. But now we go to 12-800, 25-600, and we're saying, oh, it's a bit grainy. And who needs to shoot at ISO 25-600 except to test the camera? Yeah. It's crazy. It
is true. You know, like I've looked at all my files in the database in my Lightroom library. If I select the ISO, filter the ISO out, the only time I use a 25,600 or above, it really for test all the reviews I've done. All my jobs, I never use that high ISO. Even they top out around about 6400. That would be like my emergency that I need to use. But most of them, 1600 fine, 3200 okay, 6400 is really emergency. But anything past that, I'll deem that it's not suitable for photography.
Yeah. And I see Mark Hasler in the comments beat me to what I was going to try and say about images. All of the images that we admire today were taken on with cameras much, much worse than the ones we have.
Yeah.
But we still admire them. And the other thing is, I was going to agree with your point. I've got images I've taken going back 15, 20 years on digital SLRs and even compact cameras. And if I have to illustrate an article or use an example for a how-to or do a technique piece or whatever, the resolution doesn't matter. As long as your photograph is a good one and hasn't technically bombed, you know, like the exposure's just blown all highlights or whatever. As long as the tonal range is adequate, the rest is pretty much irrelevant.
Yeah. Absolutely, and also, you know, I recently just went to the Taylor Wasing Photographic Portrait Photography Award exhibition in the Portrait Gallery. I looked at all those images in there, and it's quite interesting to see the variety of display methods. You know, some print big, some print small, and but you would think, okay, you know, those winning images would be from the latest generations of cameras with the highest megapixel counts or whatnot, you know, 15 stop dynamic range and this and that. that you'll be surprised when you look at those images. A lot of them were shot with much older camera gear, and also much lower resolution. And the one that print big are actually, yes, high resolution, but doesn't mean that they'll win it. It's still about the content, about the story, about the actual subject itself, the portrait, the techniques, and the skill set behind it. Some of the winning images are actually 6x4. They're really small, so they not necessarily need the highest resolution to be able to achieve what you want to achieve. I think ultimately it's still about the image. The image itself is what's important.
Is it like a first world problem, because some of the best photography in the world is taken by photographers in countries where there is no money, where cameras will be 10 years old. Are we going to say then they're not very good photographers because they don't have the latest cameras? Very often they have to rely more on their vision and their visual skills than we do, because the equipment's not going to help them at all.
No. You got less room to maneuver.
You've got less room to maneuver. Certainly, you have probably no room to maneuver. So the photography has to be spectacular. Yeah. Because the camera is not.
It's almost like you limit yourself with a very simple setup, in your photography to train yourself up. And that's also why when you go to photography school, very often the teacher will ask you to get a very basic, simple SLR with no options whatsoever to start you off, because you don't need all these distractions around you. All you need to do is learn your exposures, learn your settings, in the depth of field, understanding the relationship between them, and most importantly, execution. How do you frame the subject? How do you actually create an image? I think that's really is the core and always be the cream of photography, and the rest is. We always say that all these new features that we see now, the AI subject tracking, the continuous burst mode, and pro capture or pre-capture, whatever you call it, all of these are assistant modes. They are assisting what you want to achieve. They're not replacing what you want to, what skill set you have. They're not replacing it. You need to know how to do it still before you can actually use them properly.
I think it's sometimes the truth is so basic. It's easily overlooked. So having a pre-capture mode is great, but you have to know where to stand, and you have to have the right lens, and you have to know when the thing you're photographing is going to happen. And if it's sports or wildlife, if it's wildlife, you've got to be prepared to sit and hide from about 4 a.m. with nothing but a thermos flask and wait. Or if it's sports, and you're covering a major event, you've really got to have a body of work behind you that will get you a press pass to get to the place you need to be to take good photographs. The camera itself is often the last piece of the jigsaw. There's a whole lot to do and to know before you get that far. And that's probably why I'm no good at wildlife photography. I couldn't sit and hide.
But at the same time, you look at like war journalists, for instance. Like you see all these war journalists taking the cameras to war zones, for instance. They care less about what camera model you, as long as you can survive a blast. Like all the dusty stuff. That's all they care about. Just capture the image. They don't really care about AI subject tracking or this and that. They just want to be there and just capture that particular moment or the critical moments that they see in front of the lens.
Well, this is the thing. Do we spend too much time looking at our cameras instead of through them?
Very true. Yes, Carol just say, "Oh, I love my flask."
Yeah, I know. I do like a nice flask of coffee too. Yeah, it's just spending hours in a hide. I don't like. I don't mind going out for a hike, have a little drink of coffee halfway. That's nice.
Yeah. Well, I'm not a wildlife guy, and I don't think I would be able to stand in the high.
No. You have to be dedicated.
But I do admire the photograph. I do admire the dedications. But every time I see like the likes of Blue Planet, Planet Earth, you see these videographers, the photographers, they hide in there for weeks before they capture that one single shot, and then you say, "Wow, that's a shot."
Yeah. But they've got a bit of money behind them, I think.
They do. But then you still need to have that skills and also patience to be able to achieve what they achieved.
I have a different kind of dedication, so that I will often go to a place and people, if I'm with other photographers, they'll see the shot they want straight away and do it.
Yep.
But I'm just walking around and looking at stuff and climbing on a verge or looking around a corner or doing this down the other. Because for me, I have to work out where I have to be for everything to fall into place in the scene.
Yeah.
Which a lot of people either they understand it straight away and go straight there, or they don't care very much. But I like to explore everything. So I might not spend 5 hours waiting and hide for a lesser spotted gannet, if there is such a bird. But I might spend hours walking around a little area, just looking at it to see where the photograph is. So, because like, was it last year you and I, Jimmy, went to that Adobe event in London?
Yes.
And you showed me the Barbican Centre in London.
Yes, we did. Yes.
And you had to drag me off in the end because we're going to be late, you said. And there it was to say, oh, no, wait a minute. If I go here, if I go there.
You wandered off.
I did wander off, yeah. But so this idea about ripping us off, do you think that we're being sold stuff we didn't ask for and we don't need, but we've been convinced that we do?
But I don't think it's a reversible trend. I think it's going to continue, and nothing we can do to change the camera maker's mind. And they, like you said, they're still a business. They need to make money. They need to sell cameras, and they need to sell to whatever they think will be selling, and or at least attract people who are going to buy them. I know it sounds a bit silly, but us photographers probably be more serious breed and out there, and we want specific things that is benefits to our photography. But we may be the I would say dying breed, but certainly not a new breed that compared to like the Gen Z, for instance, coming up, and then they have a different type of visions when it comes to photography. Similar, just a very quick examples about recently the XM5, Fujifilm's XM5, and also the Lumix S9, the full frame mirrorless cameras. Both of these cameras were being bashed by potential photographers, claiming there's no IBIS, no EVF, it's going to be a crap camera. But in my defense is that when I reviewed the XM5, I liked it a lot. But at the same time, I understand there's the no IBIS, no EVF issues. But if you look at a lot of newer generation photographers now, I mean, from what I see online, some of the new 20, 30-year-old fashion photographers, they no longer use EVF or OVF for that matter. They simply hold the cameras like they hold their phones to photograph the models. So they were just holding arm length and just look at the big LCD screen in the back and photograph them. And they are not using cameras without EVF. They were using, the high-end cameras with EVF. They just don't use them. They use the back screen instead. So it is just the thing that they choose to use these days, and whether they prefer a bigger screen or whatever, I'm not entirely sure. It's certainly just the way they are.
Excuse me. I think though that's a big lie from camera makers saying that cameras are an upgrade from phones, because if they were, my phone has got a 6-inch screen. My camera has got a 3-inch screen. What the hell? I want a camera with a 6-inch screen like my phone. Then you'll convince me. Yeah,
but the thing, exactly what I just said there, and because of that, and camera makers may see, okay, this is the next generation. They don't really need EVF, and then people simply shooting, with arm length, just look at the back screen to shoot. And I do see a lot of people do that these days as well. Even the younger people from Japan, and when I see them, that is why they're the likes of EP7, for instance. People like using them in Japan. Even the EM10-4, people still use it like an EP7. They don't use the EVF. They just look at the back screen most of the time. So does it tell you something? Does that mean that, if people are using back screen and not EVF anyway, why do I want to increase the cost by including the EVF that no one uses, or at least no new generation uses them? And I want to attract these new people, not the old people like me, who prefer to use an EVF, and then so why do that and increase the cost? Might as well bring down the cost, squeeze more features in, or at least text in, and give you a better camera.
Could they not squeeze a bigger screen in? So, I mean, honestly,
they could, but then we'll make the camera bigger.
After a phone, a 3-inch screen is a joke. It is, isn't it? Because that works with the phone because the screen is quite big.
Yep.
Not so much with the camera because the screen is half the size. I mean, even if the whole of the back of the camera was a touchscreen, that'd be something a bit different and a bit new.
Yeah.
But then that's not going to happen. It's
I'm
too much money, probably.
I'm just looking at the latest comment from the side to a screen.
Yes.
I watched 2 guys walking around in the street with camera, and the way they shot was burst mode, everything. Actually, I've seen that a lot.
But I do as well. But whenever I've shot like that or seen people shooting like that, they get 1,000 images which are almost but not quite identical. So that is one hell of a culling session they've got coming later on. But also, you don't see something once and then shoot it 1,000 times. In any one scene, there's more than one shot, and you have to look for it. And that's a completely different skill to just saying, right, press a button and see which one's sharp or which one I like the most. I hate shooting sports for that reason. Sports are interesting, but when you get home, you've got to pick the best one. And you think, how long is this going to take?
Yeah, trying to pick the right frame.
It's about 3 hours, in case you want to know.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I do think that the approach from some of the newer photographers are, at least to me, are incorrect. Like you said, like bursting everything. And but do you think the phenomenon that you just mentioned is because of the features now being included in the cameras? In the old days, we rarely shoot past 10 frames per second. Rarely, because you only get the high-end cameras to be able to shoot 10 frames per second. Most of the consumer-level cameras are only like 3.5 frames, 4 frames per second. if
I think anyone who shoots at those speeds has to be very dedicated, or they never bother culling their images later to find a good one. That's where we need the AI and software to look at every burst and say that's the one. How useful would that be? But I've just got another crackpot theory for you from the theory factory inside my head, and that is that the minuscule attention span created by Instagram and other social feeds has transferred into the act of photography, so that people are accustomed.
I found some web results. I can show them if you ask again from your iPhone.
The goods of AI. There you go.
So I wonder if the same people who never look at an image for more than half a second in their Instagram feeds does not look at the world for more than half a second when taking a photograph.
Yeah, I mean,
I think you have to look at a place a very long time sometimes to see where the photograph is. And I think that attention span is disappeared on both sides of the equation, both as a creator and a consumer of photography.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know about anyone who's listening now. For me, the joy of photography is be there at that locations. You choose the time, and then you just wait and anticipate that moment that you want to capture, and whether it's going to be a street moment or going to be a landscape or whatnot, everything, right? The joy is that process. If you just burst everything, hoping for the best in one frame, that will work, and that doesn't really work for me. I mean, it's not just about having the attention span. It's about the art of photography, the process, and the creation process. That's the most appealing part for photography. If you just burst everything, I don't think that's photography. I think you just literally you're playing lottery.
It depends. I suppose it depends on why you're doing it. If I have occasionally done it in very low light, very marginal shutter speeds, hoping that one of them is going to be sharp. I think if you're orchestrating some action, maybe you're getting a model or a subject to jump or do some kind of action,
Yeah.
you'll want a burst because you'll want the exact perfect moment from that sequence. But I can't see the point in shooting in bursts if you want a still image of a static subject.
Yeah.
I don't know if people do that.
No.
Doesn't see much point in that.
I mean, like the last year when I was a guest in a wedding, so I wasn't photographing it, and I saw a couple of young wedding photographers, and they were bursting everything for the entire wedding. I don't know how many photos they got, probably about 40,000 photos at the end of it.
Yeah,
it was that.
How
It's
do you
crazy.
sort through them?
And
I mean,
you know, the ceremony, you know, all I can hear was just that's all I could hear. And it's really bad. And you know, that means you don't know what's going on. I mean, to me at least, you don't know what's going on. You just basically almost like you want to record the entire ceremony and pick the moment you that you think is good, rather than you know the wedding procedures, you know the moment when they're going to say, when they're going to kiss the bride, when they're going to exchange the ring. You lost the anticipation there. You just don't know. That's to me, at least, anyway. That's like sound to me and looks to me that inexperience.
well, I imagine as a wedding photographer and an event photographer, what you often do is orchestrate a thing to photograph it. And that requires a certain amount of engagement. And I think a lot of novice photographers aren't very comfortable asking people to do things.
Yeah.
And they think they can get the same result by just following them round and filming constantly until they do the thing they want. Whereas it's probably going to be better to say, look, I'd love to get this photograph. Can you be there? Can you be there? Because the light's here. And then can you do that thing? And I'll photograph it. They'll be happy. But you do have to engage with your subject, don't you? To do that kind of stuff.
You do.
Yeah.
And
so you suggesting that because camera makers are selling us cameras that now shoot 20, 30, 40 frames a second, people now feel they have to do that to justify the camera.
well, didn't we say that, right? You know, like when you spend like 2-3 grand on a 1.2 lens, you have to shoot at 1.2 all the time. It's almost like now you get a camera that can do 40 frames per second. You got to make sure you shoot the 40 frames per second to be able to justify you just bought the new camera.
Carl's just made a comment. He's got me there. The Panasonic's contrast AF in burst mode. Yeah, you would, because the AF would get around to focusing, but he didn't quite know when. So yeah, burst mode was your friend. But mostly, if I shoot a burst, every picture's the same. And you think, why have I given myself this decision to make later? Could I not just have taken one and be done with it? we don't like you. As a photographer, you have to commit.
Yeah. You do.
So shooting in burst mode isn't like committing. And I think in some ways, shooting in RAW, I always shoot RAW, but I can see one downside to it. You're not committing to a look. You know, whatever you think of film simulations or picture styles or picture controls, they do or Olympus Home System art filters, which I quite like. They are a way to make you commit at the time you took the picture to a look, which in some ways is a good thing. Otherwise, you're just putting everything off till later.
Yes.
But so do you think then, if high speed burst modes make us use them because we paid for them, is that going to kickstart the whole 8K video revolution? Because now we've got 8K cameras, we've got to shoot in 8K. Now we've got open gate 6K. Got to shoot 6K open gate because it's there and I paid for it.
I'm pretty sure people do that, but then they soon realize when they get home and they can't process them. and like not many computers can handle such 8K stream and one stream perhaps in some of the latest gen, but if we have multiple stream of 8K overlaying each other, you're gonna have a problem playing back. So it's not the easiest thing to edit.
Well, and also you're going to need it on SSDs.
Yes.
For the speed, and if you've ever got out your checkbook to pay for a 4 terabyte or an 8 terabyte SSD, that really, really hurts. It's
Oh, yeah.
so expensive.
And
Who,
memory cards, if you want to
Yeah.
CF Express, you soon find out if you shoot at 8K, that 120 gig, 256 gig doesn't last you long at all. It's soon going to run
it
out.
doesn't. And who's got an 8K monitor?
No one.
So I can see 8K as being important for high-end filmmaking. I know you've got the argument that, well, if you've got 8K capture, you can crop and pan. But that to me seems to be a bit like compensating for poor shooting. Wouldn't it be better to frame it and film in how it's meant to be in the first place? I think for bird photography and bird video or sports and action, it's interesting because that can be damn hard to follow. So you might be glad of the extra resolution so you can crop and pan later. But 8K video, it's what's that mythical creature? Chimera. Mythical creature that
Well, I mean, like you said, now we have all these new features. I'm pretty sure everyone will be tempted to try at least once, this is what it's like. I'm guilty of that. So when I see some new features, first thing I want to do when I get that camera is to try that new feature. But to be quite honest, I would say 99% of the new features that they announced in the last 10 years, and I would say that, as soon as I get over the honeymoon period, in like a week, I'm back to my normal self. I just do what I used to do, is to adjust the bloody ISO, shutter speed, and aperture. That's all I do.
I think so. We all come back to what we know in the end.
Yeah.
But I think what I found is that as a camera reviewer, I've probably got this worse than other people, but I'm constantly testing and checking and studying and comparing. And because it's my job, but it affects my photography then, because I don't take pictures for their own sake. Practically every photograph I take is also a test of this thing or that thing or another thing. But I wonder as well if many people have the same problem, even if they're not professional camera testers. The downside of paying all this money for gear is, I think, a certain amount of insecurity that it's worth it. So constantly checking to see that, that lens is as good at the edges as you'd hoped. And it had better be, because it costs you $2,500 or whatever it cost you. So I think there's a certain amount of anxiety about camera performance now that we didn't used to have.
Well, especially they're not cheap purchases. These are all fairly expensive stuff.
And you can go on YouTube, and if the algorithms are against you, it'll be full of people telling you how your camera is rubbish, and in what way it's rubbish, and how much more rubbish it is than this other one. Yeah. It can make you feel very insecure as a photographer.
Yeah. How many of you actually feel that? Let's say if you just bought a camera, and then the next day you see a video literally crushing the model that you just bought, and they say that, oh, it's rubbish, this and that, is just doesn't do as well as the other camera that just launched today. How do you feel about it? I just think that it's a bit silly, and in some way, I have to blame some of these reviews, and in a way that they don't really necessarily making a very informed criticisms, and I don't like comparison. People like to compare apples and oranges all the time. I prefer review for that particular camera, and I don't like when they're starting to talk about other cameras in that review, and then we just start kind of mix things up a little bit more, because ultimately I think like we said, like you and I talked about it, right? Any cameras we've seen in the last 7-8 years they're all good. There's no bad cameras out there. They can all take good pictures. I'm not talking about videos, but most of them can take great pictures. And I don't think you'll be disappointed or feel bad in any way of any models that you bought for the last few years.
So I think perhaps one of the ways it has affected me is that before AI subject recognition, it wasn't a thing in my head at all. I just focus on the thing I wanted in focus. It was done.
Yeah.
Since it came along, it made me think, oh, well, they've invented it. It must be important. I'd better, better check it out. And then you start to worry about, now they're saying Canon's AI subject recognition is better than Sony's. And I've got Sony. Oh, so I mean, I should have got a Canon. And then Sony brings out a version 2 or a version 3 or a version 4 of your camera. And you think, oh, this has got AI AF and mine hasn't. What have I done? And then you think, I've got to buy the new one. It's this constant pressure.
It is. It is. I mean, before the AI subject recognition, I remember Olympus, the EM1 Mark, all the EM1 or EM5 series. You remember when they first announced this face and eye detection thing, and we said, oh, wow, that is cool. You get face and eye detection. And then when the EM1 Mark III came out, they said, oh, there's an enhanced eye and face detection. So like, how much is being enhanced? And technically, I mean, I think these enhanced eyes and face detection, it's not just Olympus isolated. Lumix, they all did the same thing. They said enhanced eye and face detection. It means that the camera can detect the eye even when the subject is very small in the frame, right? But the thing is, if you think about deeply how useful or technically useful in that mode, the thing is, even if you shoot a 1.2 prime lens with ultra shallow depth of field, when a subject is that small in the frame, that means it's in a distance. You don't need to target the eyes. You target the body. The entire thing's in focus. So, like, whether it's detecting the eye or not, it makes no sense to me. It's just a little. It's a very gimmicky thing that it's got a little cross, a little dot highlighting the eye in a very tiny subject in the frame, but it makes no sense to me because the subject needs to be in focus because it's that far away from you. That 1.2 aperture, that 1 inch depth of field doesn't matter anymore.
Or if I'm out with my Canon, my 16mm lens, on a sunny day, it's at f8 or f11, and my IAF says, oh look, there's somebody 60 feet away, and I've got the eye in focus. You feel like saying, it's a 16mm at f8, everything's in focus. What's the matter with you?
Yeah, I mean, that's why I just don't think a lot of these. So I mean, these technologies and features being marketed to us photographers are sometimes unnecessary. Therefore, people who may not actually understand what they're doing. For those who are experienced enough to understand photography and depth of field, this is more gimmicky than actually. The technology itself, and same as human subject, recognitions that prioritize face and eye, which is kind of similar in a way. In fact, I found most of the time in some brands, a lot of these human detections are actually worse than the traditional face and eye detection. And I tried quite a few brands lately, and then I found most of them had the same problem. Human subject recognition actually worse than just switching on normal face and eye detection. You must just switch off human detection.
It's interesting.
Just using normal traditional face and eye detection is way more accurate.
Yeah, it is interesting, that, isn't it? Yeah. Interesting to do more tests on that as well. But I think as well about some very simple situations. I don't know whether this is something you would ever do, but if you wanted to take a photograph of a bride holding a bouquet, and the bouquet is the subject, the last thing you want is for the camera to insist on focusing on the bride. And then you think, oh, do you know what I need here is product showcase. But you don't. All you need to do is shift the focus point to where you want it, which we've always been able to do that. So a lot of the newer AI technologies have a very specific cases and scenarios that we don't encounter all the time.
Funny you mentioned that because when I photograph weddings, I actually switch off all subject recognitions. I just use my AF point. I just move my AF point to do the job, because I'd rather be the one in control of my composition and where to focus. I don't want the computer to decide for me, because I'm the one creating the images, not the computer, because they don't know what I want, and then quite often, like you said, it focuses on the wrong thing.
This was often the argument against automatic exposure on cameras, wasn't it? That in the early days it could be a bit wayward, and you're left thinking, well, do you know what? It's going to be quicker for me to do it myself than trying to figure out how to stop the camera from doing it wrong. Yeah. And I think we're getting into the same position with autofocus, where it's quicker just to focus manually or just to move a focus point than it is to stop the camera trying to do something that you don't want it to do.
Yeah.
Well, 9 times out of 10, you don't want it to do it. 1 time in 10, it's useful.
Yeah, of course. I mean, this I think why today's discussion is quite interesting is that all these extra things that like you said, the marketeers has forced upon us, saying that we need them to take photographs or better photographs, but in reality, and I think majority of them, they do have their uses. Don't get me wrong, but I think that majority of the time you'll find that yourself in a situation that it's best to just do the way you used to do, and then and how you operate a camera, that instead of just trying to get a technology to work for you if you're not familiar with it. Because I often find that I spend more time trying to fiddle around with the setting, trying to get the way it wants, and then get the photograph that I want. So it's really difficult to find a balance there. And at the end of the day, I can still get a same image by operating the way I used to do, just manually, in split seconds.
Is this another way we're being ripped off because we're being sold stuff that's worse than what we had already?
Yeah. So I'm not sure how many of you feel that way, and how many do you think that texts are great, but are we having too many texts these days in a digital cameras? We talked a little bit about it feels like modern digital cameras are for gadget lovers, and there are lots of text there that's certainly interesting. But how useful they are, it really depending on your type of photography and the type of photographer you are, what sort of thing you photograph. And I personally think that, with all the latest stuff that I have now, and I rarely look past page 2 in the menu.
You got a manual? Well,
yeah. So it kind of says quite a lot, and that's one of the reasons why I like the XM5. And the XM5 seems a bit primitive for a lot of people. And it's got a lot of features in the video side, but for still camera, it's got no IBIS, it's got no AI subject recognitions, or actually has AI subject recognition, but it's I switch it off anyway. But the whole camera is quite primitive with the button layouts and things. So and I like simple cameras sometimes, and I think that it probably what we have now, the likes of all these high-end cameras, that there's just too many buttons, too many dials, too many everything. It confuses a user who just simply want to take a simple picture.
It's I do like my EOS R8. It has flaws, one of which is it feels like it's made out of Airfix plastic, model kit plastic, but it does have very sophisticated AF, so it's got AI subject detection. It can detect all kinds of subjects automatically. But what that means is, I was out just the other week taking photographs inside a cathedral, which is fairly simple to do. You know where to focus, you go ahead. But all the time I'm doing that, there's this bots going around the whole frame saying, oh, I found this. Oh, wonder what this is. Is that a cat? Oh, that's a person. I think that's an eye. And it's just, what? So I just need to work out how to switch that off when I don't need it. But this is the problem. It takes a while to figure out how to simplify a modern camera to suit the way you work. Because you have to work out where all the things are that are getting on your nerves and how to switch them off. And back on if you need them.
Yeah. And it's just like a modern electric cars, right? So many people are complaining about, a lot of the functions are hidden in sub-menus in on the screen instead of having a buttons or switch you can switch it on and off. It almost feels like that, right? A lot of modern digital cameras, and there's so many layers of menu systems now, and because there's so many features, and it takes a while to find out exactly what you can or cannot do or switch on or off with certain features. It just takes a long time to learn about that things, and that's why sometimes I think a very basic photography cameras is what we need, and charge us less for it, and that would be great.
So are we as well being ripped off with camera construction and design?
Okay.
Because are they spending all their money on stuff we don't want? Because that's cheaper than spending money on physical tooling and materials and product design. Because we talked about how Sony cameras are the same as the Alpha cameras are the same now as they were 10 years ago. Not just Sony, everyone does this to a degree. I mean,
well, the OM1, Mark 1 and Mark II are exact same body.
Yeah, and not so very different to the EM1 III and 2 before it, I don't think, really.
And the EM5, Mark II, Mark III, and OM5.
Same thing.
Same,
so it's
same
not
body.
it's not just Sony. I think it's all camera makers are doing this. Are they just selling us the same old camera with a bit of stuff jiggered on the inside? Would it? I'd be happier if I felt they were spending more of our money on cameras that had some more intelligent design, better materials, better longevity.
Yes.
And not just plasticky things full of technology. I'd be happier spending money on a physical product, on a product that had physical quality.
Yeah.
I'd be as happy spending money on that as I would on technology, which is probably why Leica has so many fans. There will be people who will pay for that physical product and aren't too worried about the technology.
Well, it's hand built. It's using premium materials. It's hand finished, hand checked, and but people are spending the money for materials and also craftsmanship at the end of the day.
Yes,
and the lenses are used. All the glass elements inside are probably some of the most expensive glass elements you can get on the market.
Yes,
and then most of the lenses that we buy these days, including some of these professional lenses from makers, are not necessarily have the same kind of quality when it comes to lens elements. Not saying that which one is better, which one is sharper or not. That is really preferentials and personal opinions, to be quite honest. Leica lenses, and some of them are not the sharpest in the world. Technically it's not sharpest in the world, but they do have certain aesthetic. But in terms of quality and the material that they use in those lenses are simply extraordinary. I've been to Wetzlar, to their factory, and look at the lens elements collection. The engineer told me some of these elements, that single piece of glass, is already cost €200, just one piece of glass, and then that shows how expensive they are. And I can't say the same for some of the let's say Chinese lenses. I can't imagine they were using a €200 euro worth of a lens element and you probably €20 for the entire construction. That's probably more like.
Probably. That doesn't mean to say they're bad lenses. I think one thing that Chinese makers have done is they've formed a proper understanding of what photographers want from a basic lens at a good price. But I think if we're going to ask camera makers, this is going to be very boring and old-fashioned. Something like this would probably be quite expensive to make today, because they'd have to start again. They'd have to tool up with all these different body parts and components. But if I could have a camera that just had an aperture ring and a shutter speed dial, and I suppose I've got to have an ISO dial as well, I'd be happy. Yeah. And I think a lot of people would be happy, but I think the camera makers perhaps feel there's no market, or they can't market it effectively. I mean, Pentax might. Probably the only maker we could persuade to do that, but I haven't shown any sign of it so far.
Well, Fujifilm does it, right? Like aperture ring, shutter dials, and all the other stuff, and Fujifilm cameras do have those stuff.
John Allen wants to know what is a molded lens. It's it's where most modern lenses need to use aspherical lens elements. Almost all lens elements in the past had a circular radius of curvature, but there's only so much you can do with that. So aspheric elements have a kind of funny dish profile that is incredibly expensive to grind, but can actually be molded with glass quite cheaply. So molded glass aspherical elements are common now, even in cheap lenses. But the old way of grinding aspherical lenses, fantastically expensive.
Yeah.
It's perhaps Leica still does, I don't know.
Leica does ground.
They grind their own aspheric elements, do they?
Yes, they do. Yeah.
That's where the money goes. That costs a lot, because the disadvantage with molded elements is that they're molded while they're hot. Obviously, you have to have molten glass, but they have to be able to predict the optical properties of the glass when it cools for use in a lens. So it doesn't have quite the same precision. There's a little more guesswork and chemistry involved.
Yeah.
But yeah, any modern digital lens will have molded elements, which is all right. But
because there's this control, right? Because hand ground lenses are, always you have to work within a tolerance, and that's why each of these handmade lenses are different. If you're lucky, sometimes you get a really, really super duper sharp and good lens, and if you somehow one in 1,000 times you get a lemon copy, and then you probably find yourself in a bad situation and go back to the dealer. I got a bad copy because it doesn't look as sharp.
Yeah. And even modern lens manufacture does involve grinding the main elements, not the molded spherical ones, but the main glass elements. And if you've got a zoom lens with 15 elements, that's a long grinding process. It takes hours for every single element. It's all done by machine, but this is why lenses aren't cheap.
No, that is why. That's why it's expensive, and you do get what you pay for. I personally think, like it's always, invest in your lenses rather than the camera. You always get a good lens, and then the camera can come later. Especially in digital days, they keep updating. Like we said, every 18 months you got a new body.
I don't think we're getting ripped off with lenses. I think we get our money's worth, because modern lenses are pretty good. The cheaper ones you take more of a chance on. But the proper professional lenses, they're very good. This side towards screen has a good question. Are we getting more hybrid cameras at the expense of quality specific use cameras? Interesting. I'm a big fan of specific use cameras.
Me too.
I think if you're going to shoot, even if they're within the same system, if say you're a Sony user, I think it's smarter to have an A7R5 for your high-res product shots or landscapes, and maybe a ZV E1 for video, because the A7R5 is never going to be good at video, and the ZV E1 is never going to be good at stills.
Yeah,
you could go for something like the Sony A1 Mark II, but that costs more than about the other two put together, and it's not quite as good as the A7R5 for resolution. And if you shoot 4K, probably not quite as good as the ZV-1 for video. But yeah, I do like specific use cameras, because quite often you do need more than one camera, because you've got very widely different types of photography or filmmaking to do.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that is the reason I tell my wife that why I need so many cameras.
Does she believe it?
No, she doesn't.
No. But at least you save face.
Unfortunately, but the thing is, the reasons are actually genuine. I have the GX7 for video work, and I have the OM1 for when I have to photograph in a very tough environment, and I have my OM5 or smaller camera for my travel use, and they do all actually serve a purpose. Like I don't want to lug around big lump of block, everywhere I go. I can't use one camera for everything. and it just doesn't work for me. And but one thing though, that they all have common mounts. Luckily, most of them at least, the both Lumix and also my OM system share the same micro four third mount, so I can use the same lenses. So that's the beauty of it. And but other things, I just think that, like you said, if I want high resolution, I got full frame cameras to do it, and I have other cameras to do other jobs. I don't think that there's a good solution that, or at least a camera that can do everything well. Technically, you can, but I think at the expense of size, weight, and also costs.
But if you're looking for a camera to go traveling with,
yep,
you're going to want something small and light,
yep,
weatherproof, with a selection of lenses that are also small and light, and I think a factor that's easily overlooked, not so expensive. You have to be scared to use it, take it out.
Yeah.
And so I think, good as a camera like the Sony A1 II is, or the Nikon Z8 or the EOS R5 Mark II, these are cameras that are brilliant at everything. They're not brilliant to travel. They're the last cameras you take traveling. You take something like an OM5, a couple of lenses.
Yep.
Partly because it's cheap, partly because it's weatherproof, and partly because if it's stolen or it gets knocked off a table, well, you've just broken a £1,000 camera, not a £5,000 camera, and probably bounce a bit better too. So I think everyone's chasing the best, but you can't get it all in one. But no. I think it's this idea that you can get everything in one camera that's kind of driving the current market. Yep. And this is why, if we are being ripped off, it's because we think we have to have everything, because that's what everyone tells us. But really, we don't.
Yeah, or a specific features, and like Sony's are very good offenders when it comes to product variations, and they will simply launch a new product which is essentially the same as the other product they literally just launched 2 months ago.
I know.
But adding one features that can be manipulated with the original model, they call it something new, and it's just Sony, ridiculous.
Sony A7S3, Sony FX3, FX6, ZV-E1. The FX6 is different, it's this big like camcorder style, but it's all the same tech. So yeah, one set of tech, 4 cameras.
Yeah. Talk about business strategy.
Sony divides up the market into such tiny pieces.
Yeah.
How many vlogging cameras are there? So you've got the ZV-1 Mark II, ZV-E10, ZV-E10 Mark II, ZV-E1. So, some newbie YouTuber goes in a shop, says, what's the best Sony to get for my new YouTube channel? What are they going to sell them?
They will probably ask you. They probably the
how much money have you got?
The salesperson will say, do you need to focus on your hair, or do you want to focus on your mouth?
Have you got products?
Have you got products? Each one does different things. Oh dear. But that's the world we're living in, unfortunately. So I don't know. I know we set the title, but are we being ripped? And I think to a certain degree we are. And
I'd tone it down a bit. I think we're being played.
Being played. Okay, that's a better word.
Yeah.
Yeah. And what do you guys think about it? What do you think about what we just talked about, and about camera markets in general, about modern digital cameras, and do we need all these features? Do we need all these variations coming out from camera makers? And do we need to upgrade our cameras every so often? And do we need to spend all our hard-earned cash, keep chasing the latest tech? There are a lot that we talked about today, and I think for me, if I'm not, being affiliated to OM Systems or reviewing cameras, for instance, I probably would just have one camera for, at least 2 cameras for the last 10 years, 15 years. I don't think I'll upgrade. I don't think I would be changing cameras. I'll just use it because my priorities is to create images, to capture images, and but that's me. That is only just me.
So should we start with the lens and then
Lens.
treat the camera? We used in the old days, we'd start with the camera and treat lenses as not disposable items, but changeable. I think these days you should think more about the lens you want, and then think, well, this will be this camera, this will be this next year might be a different camera. So I think there are probably a handful of very interesting landmark lenses which are more important than the camera you put with them. I mean, I suppose if you would pick some from different brands, one of them would be the Olympus 12-100.
The F4
which
Pro.
is, the F4 Pro. It's a unique lens.
Yes.
Which Olympus should use with it, doesn't matter. It's because the lens is the thing that's so useful. If you let's think of a different system. So maybe you might think that Sony 2870 f2, that will change everything I do. Which camera should you get to go with it? Could be anything. A7 IV, maybe an old A7 III, doesn't matter. It's that lens that matters. Maybe that's a better way to approach it. Because I've got lenses I've used for years. I don't have cameras for years.
No, that's true. But this one here, the Olympus 25 1.2, this is actually this is my original copy, and I got a new one now. And I used this lens since it first came out, and I've been using that I don't know, 7 years now. So get a good lens and use it for years, and because ultimately that's the lens, how it renders the images that you like, and I think that for me, it's the look coming up from that lens that matters to me the most.
That's what makes a difference.
Like you said, I mean, certain lenses I bought in the past, that I bought it because I like the look of it. I like the look of the images that it creates, and then I get a camera to go with it because it doesn't matter on my camera. I just trying to get a body so I can use it.
I mean, it's not as if there are that many truly great lenses out there. So when you find one that is, you tend to go with it. I've got a very unlikely candidate in my drawer. It's the Canon 24-105 STM lens. So it's a cheap kit lens version. However, it's actually rather good.
Yeah.
And it has exceptional stabilization. So I'll keep that lens. My EOS R8 might go one day, but I'll keep that lens. So I think lenses now last for longer. But I was just noticing Rick Bear had a very interesting remark about it would be a very significant breakthrough if manufacturers allowed us to configure our cameras online, then download only the features we want for our specific intended use.
That is interesting.
So if you go on the Apple Store, you can buy a cheap Mac Mini. They start at £699. It's very basic. But then you say, oh, do you want more storage? Okay, add that on. Do you want more RAM? Add that on. If you could do that with cameras, wouldn't that be wonderful?
That may not be a bad idea. I wonder why they won't do that. And it'll be quite cool. You can.
It's because cameras will get cheaper. They don't want that.
And you can have one camera body for everything, right? And just select the feature that you want and charge accordingly. If I just want a basic camera with a basic 20 megapixel sensor and just standard stuff, standard feature, and cost you £800, I'll do it.
Yeah.
If you want the latest stuff, I want AI subject recognition for human. Okay, add another £100 for it.
That'll need a different processor, hence more money.
Yeah.
Do you want IBIS? How much is it? £200, $200.
£200 for five. £200 for 5 stop. For 8 stop, you're going to be £500.
There are limits. There are limits. I acknowledge, but it would be nice because then you could start with the cheaper, simpler products.
Right. I hope some camera makers are listening.
I'd see. I'm about to get into an argument about Mac Mini not being cheap. It's a rip-off. Let's not even go there. This always happens. It always happens.
Yes, it does. But it sounds like a good idea. I hope that one day we'll get that sort of options and to be able to configure the camera to our liking. I think that'll be quite good. And I'm pretty sure people with the budget and the people who would like to have everything would just basically tick all the boxes, right? But it'll be good to have that kind of option, so you can have just one body design, interchangeable components or features inside, so it will benefit from beginners all the way to advanced pro. I think that's quite a good idea, actually.
Yeah. But I don't think it. I think it would be quite hard to redesign cameras to be that kind of modular in the features they have.
Well, you say that though, and the French camera company Pixie, they make the digital MR. They have upgradable motherboard or the logic board, so and sensor, so you can actually when you buy the body. A few years later, when they do upgrade to the next version, you can actually keep the body and change the internals. So things are kind of being done, and they just need to be a more bigger scale in when it comes to manufacturing.
Yeah, just imagine if when System sold the A1, they said, "Do you want more RAM?"
Yeah,
£200, £400. More RAM would get you a bigger buffer, better AI, better algorithms.
yeah.
You can upgrade then instead of waiting a year or so and getting a new camera.
Yeah.
Be a nice way to work.
But then again, they will sell less camera. They can't do that.
I know this. So this is the issue, isn't it? That that in computing we're used to the idea you only buy what you need. In photography, we have to buy what they make.
Yeah,
we don't get that choice.
We've been told. We've been dictated by the camera makers.
You've got to have everything spec'd up to the max.
Yeah.
You can't decline the things you don't need.
So we are being ripped. There you go. That concludes.
We got to the headline in the end. Excellent.
Yes. So we got to it at the end, and I guess that will be the conclusion of today's chat. And but thank you very much for all of you and who participating today. And it's quite good to see all the comments out there. Sorry we can't answer and talk about every single one of them, but looks like everyone's quite enthusiastic about today's topic, so that is good to see. No doubt we're going to have another topic next week, and we got other things possibly more exciting stuff to talk about. And but if you want to discuss any specific titles or specific subject in photography, please do let us know in the comment section below, and we'll be very happy to pick it up and make it a topic and talk about it. And otherwise, you guys have a great day. And we're gonna have some new contents coming up, and but I think we're gonna have some break between Christmas and New Year. I think we're gonna have maybe a couple of weeks break, and before the New Year's come. So that will be it.
Yeah.
But until next time, I guess all of you stay safe and keep up with the good work. Keep shooting, keep using your camera. Don't leave it behind and get dusty and things like that. We are all here to make sure that it works every single day and take some photos. And whether you're going out for coffee or going out for a jog or a hike or whatever, like a camera is always with us. Rod is nodding. Okay, guys. Guilty. All right, guys. I'll see you all very soon. And until next time, see you, Nate. Bye.
Bye.